Hello YouTube and welcome back to World of Warships with Wadres. Today I'm actually starting, I guess I could say, what's going to be a very short-lived tutorial series, just kind of introducing newer players to the game mechanics and how everything works, basically. And yeah, I am showing this off in Tier 10 ships, just for grins, but these mechanics are basically going to be the same regardless of the tier that you choose to operate in, so they're still very, very applicable. If anything, they are just showcased a little bit better with some of the higher tier ships, I suppose. Now, as far as anything goes, your first basic controls are going to be your movement controls. How do you move around in the on the map? Now, this is the ocean map for those of you who are also, again, new to the game. Those of you who are experienced with the game know that you don't see this one too often, but it does kind of come around. But it does offer a lot of flexibility in regards to just being able to move around in whichever way you go. So it's good for kind of showcasing just basic mechanics. Now, to start moving your ship forward, you use the W key. And you have 4 forward settings. You have 1/4 throttle, 1/2 throttle, 3/4 throttle, and full speed ahead. And of course, your ship type as well as your overall ship's characteristics will determine the overall maximum speed your ship can reach. To slow down, you simply hit the S key to either bring it to a stop, or you can just reduce your throttle, again, just by using the S key. To reverse, you simply go to stop and then hit S to go to full reverse, and this will kick your ship into backing up and going the opposite direction. And of course, there are still physics that take part in the game, so unfortunately, ships do take time to change directions. But once the ship does change direction, it will, or once the ship does come to a stop, it will start to actually go in the proper direction that you wish it to start moving. So, as you can see, I am now moving backwards. And it will also display your, if you are reversing, it will display your speed as a negative value on your dial. So that is something else to keep in mind. I am going to stop the ship for the moment so that I can start changing my direction back to full throttle forward. There we go. The next thing is your rudder shifting. To control your rudder, you have 2 options. You have the A, D, or the Q and E keys. You can use the A and D keys. These will gradually shift your rudder over towards the maximum, but you can also use this as kind of feathering your rudder to depend on how tight and how quickly you want to turn. And you just use it to turn quickly, either port or starboard. And obviously, again, depending on your ship type, these are these values will be different. Destroyers generally tend to have the fastest rudder shift times, where they'll swing over in about 3 seconds, whereas the Yamato, like I am piloting here, generally is more on the 20-ish second range. The other thing, again, that I mentioned is if you are engaged in battle and don't really have time to be monitoring your keystrokes too much, you can also use the Q key to lock your throttle at either the 1/2 or full setting to the left, and you use the E key to do the same to the right. And to disengage the rudder lock, all you have to do is hit the A or D key, and it will disengage the rudder lock. going to come back to a stop here. The other thing that you will notice in the bottom left-hand corner is you do have your relative bearing map. It will show roughly which direction your compass, which way your ship is pointing. Right now I am actually looking towards north, so it will actually tell you which general direction you are looking at, south, north, east, west, so forth. And it will also give you an indicator to where your guns are rotated relative to your ship, as well as your viewpoint relative to the ship. So you can always have an idea of exactly where your camera is looking, so to speak, in the three-dimensional space. And of course, one of the other things to note as far as your basic mechanics also for the ship is your turret rotation. You'll notice the turrets will, unless you have your camera set to free look or have your armament, say, locked using the Shift X or the Shift S key. Hold on. It's not wanting to cooperate for me. Okay, Shift X to lock on sector. And basically that just locks your guns in one direction and allows you to look around without your turrets following your cursor. Otherwise, if the turrets are not locked in any one direction, they will follow the cursor, because this is essentially how you aim, and that will be a tutorial discussed at another point in time. The lower right corner, or lower left corner, will also give you other information. You have your health bar there, which tells you, well, basically how healthy your ship is. Currently with the Yamato, I have 97,200 hit points, and my health bar is full. As if I were to take damage, this number would drop off as I take damage, and if it reaches 0, obviously my ship will be sunk. I do have a other modification here, however, which also shows me how much you will have concealment, or consumables that you will get and gain access to with differing ship tiers. The Yamato at tier 10 has a heal consumable, and in this case I do have a modifier, or a mod on the game, which shows me how much health I can heal back from a single use of that heal consumable. For anything else, you do have your ammo types as well. You have high explosive and armor piercing. There are some ships which only have armor piercing shells. And at tier 1, all of the ships will have, say, high explosive. To simply switch between the two, you use the 1 or the 2 key, and that will select your ammo type. So, for example, I just switched over from my armor piercing loaded to high explosive. And again, as a basic mechanic, your guns do have a certain amount of time that it will take to reload. So if you have a ship that has a particularly long reload time, you really want to be a little bit more careful about timing your ammunition selection, or just simply knowing what ammunition you want to be using under just about any circumstances. On the bottom right corner, of course, you do have your mini-map. This gives you your overall intelligence information for the game. You can see I have it actually pretty well set up. For right now, I'll turn some of these circles off. Now, the map will always show you the maximum extent of your main battery firing range. This is the greater white circle that is kind of showing sort of on the map right now for me at 26.6 kilometers away from my ship. And you can also have it set to show your detectability range. This is your various detectability ranges, I should say. Right now I have it set for showing my detectability range from the surface. And anytime you fire your guns, like, say that, your detectability range will bloom out to your maximum gun range, at least for your surface detection range. And it takes about 20 seconds for that to reset and go back to its original base value. You also have your air detection range, which is the range at which aircraft from aircraft carriers or from other ships will start detecting your ship. For the Yamato, it is 12.8 kilometers. And just like the surface detection range, as soon as you fire your guns, that number will go out to a greater range, in this case 22 kilometers for the Yamato. You can also have the game show your secondary battery range. These are basically guns that are automated. You do not control them directly. Even if you have a couple of these secondary battery skills opted for in-game, these guns will still fire on their own. You really can't aim them so much. The only thing you really can do is with a more skilled captain, you can opt for manual fire control for secondaries, and even then that doesn't really control the guns so much as it allows you to directly select the targets they are aiming at. And of course, last but not least, you can also bring up a circle that shows the maximum range of any anti-aircraft guns that you happen to have on your ship. And for the Yamato, in this case, the maximum firing range is 5.8 kilometers. Other ships, this will be larger or smaller, though I think 5.8 is kind of the maximum in the game right now. Personally, for my own comfort, I like having all of these circles displayed on the mini-map just so that I have all of this information available to me if I happen to really kind of be pushing the limits a little bit, I guess you could say. As far as other things on the mini-map, however, you will also notice there are 3 other circles on the map with A, B, and C. For this particular battle mode, this is the Domination Mode on Ocean. So these are actually the capture points for the map. And what you would do is you would sail into one of these circles, and after a certain amount of time, you will have captured the zone. Now, enemy ships attacking you while you are attempting to capture will reduce your capture progress, so this is generally something better done by ships with either low concealment or by ships that have a substantial amount of cover between them and an opponent. The other thing is that any enemy ships that are within the circle as well as you will prevent any capture progress from occurring. Even if you have 2 ships in a capture circle, as long as the enemy has even just 1 ship in there, there will be no capture progress. And the capture progress will also usually be displayed either on your HUD or on the map boundary, the mini-map. On the upper edge of your screen, you do have other information. These are your team bars. Right now, I am the only person on my team in the Yamato. The enemy team is displayed in red. The friendly team will be displayed in green. The enemy team I currently have set up with a Harugumo, a Hindenburg, a Worcester, a Yamato, a Grosse Kurfürst, and a USS Lexington aircraft carrier. And the team bars are also shown on the side panels. On the left, it is my team, again with the Yamato, and on the right, it is the enemy team showing the spread of ships as well. On the top of the screen, the other piece of information here is you actually have capture or points bars. Right now, because neither team has control of either of the capture points, and it will also show which, say, capture points are occupied, there are 300 points per piece per team. And as long as none of the capture points remain occupied, that will remain the same. Also, these points will be affected by ships that are sunk. Going to the tab key, which brings down other information. You can see the points values for ships. So, for example, if I were sunk, granted I'm the only ship on my team, but if I weren't the only ship on my team would lose 60 points for having lost a battleship. And the enemy team would gain 40 points for having sunk me. So my team would be reduced to 260 points, the enemy team would be bumped up to 340. And the same would occur to the enemy team. So, for example, if I sink the enemy's Yamato, they would lose 60 points and I would gain 40. And this is basic battle information. Up at the top right corner, you will also see a timer that is counting down. It is currently showing about 44 minutes, and that is simply how long the battle is set to occur. For your standard match, it is about 20 minutes, and that is for basically any of the game modes, random, ranked, co-op, etc. and so forth. Another modification or modifier that I use for my own information is I do have a secondary battery and anti-air battery status board, which tells me basically how healthy my secondary and AA batteries are. It will also, so these 100% marker is how, basically how healthy my guns are. 100% for both my AA and secondary batteries. And it also shows the range to which my batteries are effective. As far as the information around the cursor right now, and this is something that will be readdressed with any of the aiming mechanics, it is going to show you the flight time of any shells that you fire and the range at which your cursor is currently set. So for right now, my cursor is looking 2.79 kilometers away from my ship, and the flight time for my shells, if I were to pull the trigger, is 1.19 seconds. Obviously, greater ranges will increase the flight time of your shells, and it will increase accordingly, and it will give you that information. I suppose I will go ahead and start closing in on a couple of the enemy ships now, just to get them in view range so that I can showcase a few other mechanics. I do suppose that one other thing I should mention is that in regards to the capture circles, any capture circle that is occupied will bring in a certain number of points for your team as the battle progresses. It can be dependent on the map in some cases. Lower tiers may have lower points values for any individual capture circle. And for other battle modes, like say the epicenter battle mode on some maps, you will have the center circle, which will have a higher points value than say the inner or the middle rings. And the middle ring will have a lower points value than the center ring, but a greater points value than the outer ring. For epicenter battle modes, you will also receive more points still for having all of the capture points occupied, both outer, inner, and center, to basically draw the match to a close that much faster. And as you are about to see, I am about to enter the B capture point, so you can see what a base capture in progress looks like. And as you can also see, I have entered the visual range of the enemy Grossschiffer that I have on map. Fortunately, he is not going to shoot at me. I don't have him set to move for the purpose of this tutorial. But if I did have him set to shoot at me, he would definitely be firing on me right about now. And as you can see in the center right above my ship, it is showing me the capture progress and how long it would take to capture with just my ship in that circle. If the counter counts all the way down and reaches 0, the capture point will be fully flipped by my team, and I would start bringing in points. Now that I have actually closed to the combat range, where I can see the enemy ships, you will also notice another indicator has popped up, and this is another modifier that I have opted to use. This simply shows the relative bearing of my ship and the enemy ship that is currently locked for engagement. If I switch my reticle over to the enemy Yamato over here, it will switch to the Yamato and give me that relative bearing as well. So for example, the enemy Yamato is currently angled 37 degrees relative to my ship, and I am angled about 70 degrees relative to the enemy Yamato. By comparison, the Grosse Kurfürst is at 8 degrees of angle, and I am angled at about 45 degrees. Okay, so let's start a little something else here. Okay, now that I have gotten in range of a number of the enemy ships that I have set, again, they aren't set to either move or shoot back at me, just for the purposes of kind of showcasing this tutorial a little bit more. I have 5 enemy ships within visual range. I have a destroyer. I have an aircraft carrier up over here, the USS Lexington. I have a enemy German battleship, the Grosse Kurfürst. I also have a US light cruiser, the Worcester, and I have the enemy, another Japanese battleship, the enemy Yamato. Now, again, there are some things to keep in mind when you are choosing your targets for enemy ships. One of them is your firing range, the other is the armor of the enemy ship, as well as the angle of the ship. The angle and the armor will dictate the shells that you use upon firing at the enemy. Now, I suppose the Haruguma probably is not the greatest choice in regards to my selection of destroyers, simply because she does have a special interaction with armor-piercing shells. However, if any other destroyer, if I were to shoot upon her, and my dispersion actually played a better role and actually hit the ship, jeez, wow, that really kind of sucked, didn't it? The shells would have simply over-penetrate the ship entirely and do a drastically reduced amount of damage to the enemy ship. Now, all shells will have a certain amount of damage that they can do. For example, my armor-piercing shells in the Yamato, and again, I can just bring my cursor over the details to bring this up. The main battery firing range, again, 26.6 kilometers. The maximum damage that any one shell will do is 14,800 hit points. This is if I land my shells in a critical system of the enemy ship, and they reload in 30 seconds. And that 30 seconds is standard for the guns of the ship that I am using. The high explosive shells only will do a maximum of 7,300 damage, but the armor threshold of high explosive shells is a little bit different. Armor piercing shells will have a arming cap that will not arm until they are passing through the armor of an enemy ship, and they will have a fuse where they will detonate after a very short period of time to do damage within the ship. High explosive ammo, by comparison, will detonate on contact with an enemy ship and will do damage directly to enemy armor. So again, just taking a couple pot shots at this Harugumo, trying to get something to hit. Wow, I'm really not getting a whole lot of luck with this with this tutorial as far as showcasing these guns, am I? So let's go ahead, wait for these guns to reload yet again, and see what happens. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. And this is... there we go. One nice solid hit on the Harugumo. And down here, you will get all kinds of information regarding how your shells actually behaved. And if you come up to the upper corner here, it will give you information as well. Now, up here is your ribbon rack. This will basically show you everything that you have done over the course of the match, effectively. So, for example, I have spotted 5 of the enemy ships so far, and I have landed 1 hit on target. And it will give... and going to the target hits detail, it will actually tell me the statistics on what my shells have actually done. So in this case, the 1 hit that I've landed on that Harugumo, I managed 1 over-penetrating hit. That means that the shell did hit the ship, but it went through all layers of armor. It basically went entirely through the ship and detonated on the far side. By comparison, if I were to shoot at, say, the Große Kurfürst over here, I do substantially more damage. I do land 2 over-penetrating hits. Those probably hit around the superstructure of the Große Kurfürst. But I also got 2 penetrations. That means those are shells that actually did go past the armor layer and get into the ship to do damage. I also managed 4 ricocheting hits. Those are shells that did not penetrate the armor at all. They simply bounced off the armor layers of that ship. And that is something that you will see primarily with armor-piercing shells as well. They will ricochet instead of shattering or anything like that. And if they do penetrate the armor, but the armor is too thin, they will simply over-penetrate and do drastically reduced damage. Switching over to the high explosive shells on the Harugumo here, let's see how that changes how she interacts with these shells. And hopefully I can actually hit her. Yep, 1 shell, it did hit and penetrate, but you can also see that the amount of damage that was done was greater in this case than the damage that I did with the 1 over-penetrating hit. The over-penetration only did close to 1100 damage, whereas the penetrating high explosive hit did a little bit over 2000. So because it detonates on contact with the Harugumo's armor, instead of over-penetrating, it simply did substantial amounts of damage. High explosive shells also have the chance to set fires, as you have just seen me do, and they can also incapacitate modules. Armor-piercing shells do not have as great a capability of causing incapacitations, but they will still run the chance of penetrating deeper into the enemy ship for doing critical damage in what is called a citadel hit. Citadels are the more protected sections of an enemy ship. They have better armor, but they are also vital points. If you do get shells into an enemy ship's citadel, you will do basically full damage from any shell type you have chosen. For example, let's say I choose to shoot at this Lexington. Maybe I'll get lucky. No, not quite. Let's try something else, like say the Worcester. Now the Worcester is a ship that is lightly armored. Also looking at the angle, the effective armor is reduced. And this is one of the other things that you have to take in mind is when you're shooting at enemy ships, what is their effective armor? Ships that have a narrower angle upon you, for example, this Große Kurfürst, that armor looking at you is going to be relatively thick, even if the armor itself technically isn't. So when you're looking at them from an angle, the effective armor is actually thicker than the actual armor. Whereas if you are looking at the ship, say, broadside on, the armor is effectively only the thickness of the armor plate instead of being influenced by the ship's angle quite as much. Let's see what happens to this Worcester. Got some good hits. Unfortunately, the Worcester is lightly armored for a cruiser, so I did land over-penetrating hits where there really wasn't an incredible amount of damage dealt. But if I keep shooting at it, maybe I'll get lucky. Something else that you want to do with ships that are giving you a broadside is you want to aim a little bit more for the waterline than for the higher sections of the ship. Aiming for the waterline gives you better chances of hitting an enemy ship's citadel, as well as reducing the chance of landing over-penetrating hits. Come on, give me a citadel here. There we go. Not just one, but 2 citadels on the Worcester. And as you can see, that did very substantial amounts of damage to the Worcester, bringing it down. And of course, I can also add a destroyed ribbon to my ribbon rack, as well as the hits to citadel ribbons, which you will get anytime you land a citadel on an enemy ship. So I have now showcased both the ricochet, the over-penetration, penetration, citadel. Let's see, looking at this Grosse first, the Grosse first actually has some very thick armor in many places. And while the Yamato does have very big guns, these guns should at least be able to showcase the final ribbon, which, especially if those hit the turrets, yep, there we go. We have the non-penetrating hit, which is also referred to as a shatter, where the shell basically, it detonates on contact with the armor, but it does not actually penetrate. Another ribbon that I do not have to showcase here yet, oh wait, yes, there is one, is the partial penetration hit. In this case, it is also referred to as the torpedo protection hit, where maybe your shells impact one layer of armor, but the ship has multiple layers. So you penetrate the first layer of armor, but you do not penetrate the subsequent layers, resulting in only partial penetrations that do minimal damage. One of the other basic ship controls that I should outline is the zoom reticle. This is basically how you can affect your aiming at longer ranges so that you can still hit your targets. For example, right at the moment, if I were to shoot at this enemy Yamato, just kind of estimating by my cursor marker, I can get my shells close, but it is entirely possible that I may, well, okay, I do hit very well, but those shells could have very easily gone very shallow, or missed my target entirely, simply because at the longer ranges, the amount of motion that it takes for the cursor to hit a certain range is substantially small. Just a few pixels is the difference between shooting at 11 kilometers versus 17 kilometers, which is a huge difference when you're shooting. On the other hand, if you wish to be very accurate with your targeting, you hit the Shift key, and this will give you a scoped or zoomed in view, which you can then zoom in or zoom out using either your scroll wheel, well, mainly using your scroll wheel on your mouse, and this will allow you to fine-tune your aim very easily. So now I can actually pinpoint that Yamato at 15 kilometers, just like that, instead of kind of guesstimating based on where my cursor is on the ship's silhouette at range. And I think I actually landed better hits with the estimation, but that's beside the point. The simple fact of the matter is, if you are shooting at targets long range, you definitely want to do so more with your view zoomed in than you do with your view zoomed out, just because you have way too much variability with your cursor at the longer ranges. At shorter range, it is better to go on just your basic field of view instead of zoomed in, just because your basic field of view does move faster than the zoomed reticle. So for close-in gunfights, it's a lot better, again, just to be on your external view. Now, something else you can do is with your camera, you can actually be on close-in ship view, and this will actually give you view from your turrets directly. And all you have to do to shift between your gun groups is hit the C key to switch easily between forward and rear turrets. And this basically gives you the bird's eye view from your guns, especially if you are in, again, say, closer quarters battles, where you may not necessarily be able to see the effective range of your ship's turrets. However, personally, I like to be fully zoomed out because it gives me the full idea of where my ship is in three-dimensional space, and I simply use the indicators on the bottom of my screen above my consumables and ammo selection types to give me an idea of what turrets are effective. For example, on the bottom right now, I have only 2 turrets that can actually fire upon the point that I have aimed at. The third turret is shown as being basically in traversing mode, where it is unable to reach the aim point, so it is both shaded and it is also showing in orange. If the turrets are traversing, they will show as being fully loaded in this case. That is, and by the way, this is also your load meter. So when I pull the trigger, it will slowly show the meter ticking away as the guns reload. But as the guns are traversing, they will show orange. And then once they have reached your aim point, they will highlight as green. And again, any turret that cannot reach the point that is currently being aimed at will show a shaded version of the fully loaded indicator, but they will not present as green because they cannot reach that point. They are basically not clear for fire. And only the turret that can shoot upon that targeted point will actually fire when you pull your trigger. For any other information regarding things that I have talked about in this video, specifically some of the mods that I use, I will have that put into the video description for you. I will go right out and say that they are from the Aslain Modpack, Aslain, and I will specify which mods are actually used in the video description. And that is basically it for this tutorial so far. If you stay tuned for me, I will, for my next video, I will give you a little bit of information regarding your aiming mechanics. As far as everything else that I have shown you here, however, these are just your basic need-to-know mechanics in regards to dealing with enemies. And I can definitely also expand upon them at a later time. Anyway, that is it for right now. I hope you have enjoyed this video. I hope you have found it informative, and I hope to catch you all again later. Have a good one. Happy hunting, folks.